the cities pass, that the state passes. Those are not going to change. Okay, so those protections are in place for everyone. And it's important for you to be aware of it. Okay? In addition, there's another state agency called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, DFEH. The director sent a recent message because they're seeing an increase, an uptick in hate violence. And they enforce what's called Civil Code Section 51.7. And just very generally, that code, it states all persons within the jurisdiction of this state of California, okay, so not any other state, but within California, have the right to be free from any violence or intimidation by threat of violence committed against their persons or property because of their race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, political affiliation, sex, sexual orientation, age, disability, or position in a labor dispute. And there's some additional protections as well. And the examples that they list can include, graffiti, vandalism, being threatened with physical violence. So if you know someone that has gone through that, or you yourself are going through it, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing is enforcing those things. Okay? So those rights are in place, they will be in place, in the coming years. Question?
Yeah, I was wondering about the minimum wage. Does that apply to domestic workers and agricultural workers also?
Good question. So the minimum wage for the state of California applies to all industries within the state. Yes. So to answer your question, it applies to domestic workers, agricultural workers. There isn't a different minimum wage for different industries. However, when you talk about overtime, okay, for domestic workers, it's interesting how some of the hardest working people have to work more before overtime kicks in. All right? So domestic workers, they have to work 45 hours or more before overtime kicks in. If you work in an office with air conditioning, if you work 40 hours, after 40 hours, overtime kicks in. Okay? So if you work in an office, you're not an exempt employee, overtime kicks in after 40 hours a week and 8 in a day. If you're a domestic worker, it kicks in after 45 in a week and 9 hours in a day. And for agricultural workers, it kicks in after they've worked 10 hours in a day and 60 a week. Okay? So you got to break your back for a lot of hours before that kicks in. Now, there's a new law that was passed that is finally, by 2021, going to change things and allow agricultural workers to get overtime after 40 in a week, 8 in a day. It's a great step forward, but it's going to take a few years before it gets implemented. So a lot of agricultural workers that feed us are going to continue to break their backs for many long hours before they get old. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
I know that's the law, but in terms of employers, having a workforce that may be very vulnerable, maybe undocumented workers, could we argue that in those two types of industries, domestic workers and agricultural workers, that there's a high percentage of employers that don't even pay the minimum wage? Or are we finding that it's standard now that they are paying the minimum wage?
Yeah, it's a great question, in those industries. I would argue that in those industries of domestic workers, agricultural workers, janitorial workers, construction workers, restaurant workers, I can keep going. There's a lot of industries where immigrants working, and an employer oftentimes turns away from immigration status at the beginning of the employment relationship. But when the worker wants to enforce their rights, they'll say, oh, no, if you try to enforce your rights, you're undocumented. You cannot do that. I can pay you under the minimum wage, even though that's incorrect and that's against the law. Okay, the main issues, for example, in a wage check is, if a worker goes and tries to steal a 99-cent bag of chips at a store, and they get caught, we know what's going to happen. But if an employer steals $10 a day, 5 days a week, $50 a week, 50 weeks out of the year, right? $2,500 a year, $7,500, 3 years that you can go back and recover, nothing happens to the employer, right? And the employer wants to keep that working population quiet. So a lot of times they use a retaliatory means to keep them quiet. Say, if you say anything, I'm going to call immigration. Unfortunately, it is possible that employers under the upcoming presidency will try to use that, because there's a lot of rhetoric against immigrants. There's a lot of rhetoric against visible minorities, Muslims, Latinos, Asian community, if you're from a particular religious background. So, but it's important to understand that those rights are in place. Those aren't changing. If you face discrimination, if you face harassment, if you face retaliation, you can still enforce your rights. That's not going to change. Okay? You want to add anything, myself?
With the second question, right?
Yeah. Or, I don't know if you want to add to the first
Well,
one.
I actually did, but it can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can, if it's about this one, then I can just cover the other.
Well, no, it's more to the point that, see, I think if anything, we owe your generation an apology. Because for most of your lives, I think the reality you engaged had a lot of very nice things in it. And we did not educate you to the fact that those things were really more temporal than permanent. And so now you're coming into a new awakening. The whole country's coming into a new. The last 8 years are the exception. They're not the rule. What Trump represents has been the rule. I mean, this country was founded on slavery. And you go to every former slave-holding state, and racism runs deep. And of course it would, because every former slave-holding state had to codify racism into its culture to justify slavery. That's why things are better in California. Not because people in California are necessarily better, but there's no history of slavery. But on the other hand, there is a history of exploiting cheap labor from Latin America. So you see, we are who we are. And so we owe you that apology because we perhaps misled you. But my point here is that you're right. These things, the law is the law. And we have to, there's always a risk as an individual in demanding your rights. There's always a collective benefit for whatever sacrifice you make as an individual in demanding your rights. Notice I didn't say there's a collective benefit. You know what I'm saying? It may cost you something to exercise your right, but the benefit goes not only to yourself if you're lucky enough to win, but it goes to everybody else. Even if you lose, there still is an eventual benefit. So, that's what I wanted to add. You know what I mean?
And that's an excellent point. Earlier this year, one of the first victories that the Labor Commissioner had was on behalf of 5 domestic workers who we were able to get, a good amount of money for each of them, about $50,000 per, because they were being exploited. And aside from the monetary benefit that they got, the workers that were working there after they left and that are working there now, they're getting paid right now. They're going to continue to get paid. So.
I guess to the second part of the question with regards to whether work visas are going to get any easier. I guess my personal opinion is that it's not going to get any easier. I guess a lot of people kind of think that, people who immigrate just take over the unskilled, low-wage jobs, but a lot of people don't really realize that a lot of people who immigrate here coming in with work visas to take over some of the high-skilled jobs that a lot of people can't really cover here. Or an example would be like Facebook. And so I believe right now, the sentiment, with regards to whether they're taking over a lot of the jobs, either unskilled, high skilled, you'll probably get a lot, harder to get simply because the sentiment to keep the jobs here for people who are already here to take over the jobs. So getting a work visa will probably be a little bit more difficult, but right now it's really, we don't really know what's going to happen because once the new administration comes in, they'll have to see what will actually work best.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I had a follow-up on the housing. No, this is for you. On
Oh,
housing. Can you talk about, does Oakland have a buyout clause? And if you think your landlord's raising the rent so they can move, so they can gentrify, is there a way to fight that? To at least get your buyout, right? You know what I mean?
So the question is, so if there's a buyout clause in Oakland, so if you're protected by rent control, the landlord will be constrained by rent control for how much they can raise your rent. And just an addendum, one of the few good things that happened in the past election cycle in Oakland was that rent control has been expanded a little bit. So to clarify, it will expand to residences that were constructed before February 1996, starting in February. If you're not protected by rent control, if your landlord is trying to raise your rent to get you out for renters who can pay more, as far as I know, there is nothing you can do unless he is specifically, if your landlord is specifically targeting renters of a particular ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation. That would be a discrimination claim. Unfortunately, I don't know of other protections. Yeah. One thing I did want to mention, I think everyone on this panel has been really, really wonderful about sharing great resources which can help you in protests, which can help you organizing. I wanted to mention two around housing rights, as housing is such an important issue in the Bay Area now. Two organizations and also others are doing great rights, organizing tenants to push for more protections, to push for lower rents, more affordable housing. Those two organizations are called Tenants Together. And then a second one is based in Oakland. It's called Just Cause, Causa Justa. So Tenants Together and Just Cause. Those are places you might connect with if you want to get involved with advocating for policy change and with protesting the gentrification in the East Bay. Our next question is about the rights of protesters. What can you do to protect yourself? What are resources, strategies, and with a special focus towards students?
Okay, so I think that for those of you who are involved in the sort of current, what I would call the mass reaction to what's happening right now and stuff like that, I think there are two fundamental questions. Number one, in terms of knowing your rights, we sort of talked about that. So you do have a right to protest, you do have a right to do that stuff. But I think the more important problem is a political problem and not a question of rights. And it has to do with what I would call an anarchist line that's out there. That is, people who are anarchists believe that whenever they protest, they have a right to destroy other people's property, regardless of the issue. And the reason why I want to point that out is because when we were in the movement and we were struggling against racism, we had people who wanted to turn every demonstration into a fight with the police. And the problem with that was that these were serious issues, and they needed to be taken up seriously. And it wasn't about raging. We were trying to change reality. We weren't trying to exercise our demons, as it were. So I think that you have a responsibility, if you're going to participate in the anti-Trump movement, if you're going to participate in around any of these issues we talked about, to be responsible. And there has to be an open, aggressive debate in the group about who stands with us and what does it mean to stand with us. We used to draw lines of demarcation, and it was like, okay, if you're going to march with us, these are the rules you have to agree to participate by. Now, I know that in some of the Black Lives Matter rallies, there were a couple of times when people put up signs at the gathering point, leave your privilege at the door, and they were targeting these people who, in the last cycle, even the police were aware enough to point out of the 17 people they arrested for burning the rally, 12 of them didn't even come from Oakland. Okay? And that's the problem I'm talking about. So I don't feel like you have a right to come to my community and throw rocks and bottles into the window of the local radio shack because you think you're doing something against corporate America or whatever. when I actually know the guy who owns the Radio Shack's local, it's just a franchise, you know, he's not the corporate head, right? Plus, how does that relate to saving Black lives, you know? So I think that the way you have to combat that tendency, you have to be responsible for your movement. And what you'll find, if you do that, you will get support, not only from the National Lawyers Guild, you'll get support from the labor movement, you'll get support from people like me. Because I know there's a whole grouping of working people in Oakland who support fundamental worker rights on all of these issues. And will come out and support you, but they're not gonna do it as long as the anarchists get to control the agenda. And so you have to form coalition. And when you form your coalition, you have to say, look, this is, and then they'll stand up and say, well, we don't think people should vote. Everybody should be able to do whatever they want to. And you have to say, no. If you want to do that, you go do that. We're here to do this for this reason, right? So it's like we want to have, it's like what Officer Grant's mother said, you know, I appreciate what y'all doing, but you should have a peaceful protest for Oscar. You know, you don't need to burn the city down. That's not going to change anything. So that's what I really wanted to talk about in terms of strategy. You have to have a strategy. You need to have a historical context. You need to do the investigation and the research to understand that you're not the first people who have bled in the street. And that if you want to learn from the past, then one of the first things you have to do is learn who you can allow to join you in opposition to what you're against. Okay? It's the same thing we accuse Trump of. Okay, say you're anti-democrat, say you're anti-progressive, say you're anti-black, say all of that. But does that mean you have to run with Nazis? See? And so that's the whole thing. On our side, who do we want to run with? Who do we want to demarcate? So we can actually advance the causes that are significant and impact our lives. So you can't, if you're in the labor movement, you can't go to the labor strike demonstration with sticks and stones and just act out. They're not going to let you do that. The labor movement won't let you do that because it's it's about their jobs. And so that's what I wanted to say to you, because I think that debate needs to take place. And more, and I see by people nodding their head, you understand what I'm talking about. But you have to, there's a way to do that. And the way you do that is you have to take responsibility for organizing the coalition and defining what's acceptable opposition. I'll give you one concrete story and then stop. I was fortunate enough to be in a situation where I was invited to go to Libya by the Libyan government, all expenses paid, on the anniversary of the U.S. attack in the city of Tripoli. Now, the U.S. attacked Libya, bombed Tripoli, the capital city, ended up killing Gaddafi's daughter in her bedroom because they dropped a bomb on his house in the room where his wife and him normally slept. They were not in the room, collapsed the roof and killed his daughter. So on the anniversary of that, the Libyan government wanted to have people all over the world come and see their side because they knew CBS and NBC and all those people would be there. So they invited a bunch of us to go. So we went. And we're in the hotel where they're putting us up, like they're paying for everything. And all of a sudden, these Nazis come from Germany. Straight up Nazis, right? And we're all going like, whoa, we're sort of here because of U.S. imperialism and we don't like, third world liberation. But we're not Nazis. What are the Nazis here for? And the Libyans say, oh, well, they hate the Jews. And we don't like Israel. And we said, well, wait a minute. My enemy's enemy isn't necessarily my friend. So we told them, said, look, you got a choice. We either all going to leave, or at least they have to leave. So they took the Nazis someplace else, okay? All right? But, so I was willing to be there to thump my nose at the U.S. government, but I was not willing to be there if it meant I had to ride with Nazis. So that's what I'm saying. Don't get me wrong, please. I'm not calling the anarchists Nazis. That's not my point. My point is, who's responsible to the issues that you really, really trying to be advanced, and who's acting in a responsible way to advance those issues?
Just to be on the same page, I think, just as representatives of the Public Defender's Office, imparting this knowledge that you got from today on your fellow marchers, fellow protesters would be really important. You guys are all on the same page. We understand we're not throwing rocks. We know that there's going to be riot police there. They're going to be on 7th Street. We're going to be marching peacefully along Fallon, whatever it is. Coming up with a plan to make sure that you're protected, you get your political voice heard, you're organized, people take you seriously, and And, you know, sometimes I've seen protests, the police may even be your comrades in certain ways. You'll see there are counter-protesters, especially now with Trump. All this crazy stuff has risen to the surface because his generation didn't tell us about it. But all these things are now getting validated. People's bigotries, people's, you know, demons. The country's demons, the state's demons, local demons are coming to the surface. So if you are met with counter-protesters, I can say that they also have a right to protest, that it's best not to engage with them unless it's peaceful and at a distance. And knowing that in advance will keep you protected and also make you look serious. I mean, there's been grassroots organization, and then before you know it, Al Sharpton is speaking at their next event. The sky's the limit for you guys. So yeah, take it very seriously, be safe, and power to the people.
And if anyone, again, you know, even if you consider yourself very legally well-informed, when you're in the street at a protest, at a rally, some of those interactions when you're in a large group of people, when you interact with the police, it can be very confusing, even if you know your rights, when something special happens. So I don't have a little PowerPoint of what are protesters' rights, but again, if anyone has a more specific question about what if that happened, you know, now or afterwards, I'd be happy to talk about that stuff as well, because I know that can be, you know, it seems like a lot of, you know, normal situations, one-on-one encounters, those rules kind of go out the window a little bit when you're part of a large gathering here. So I had that.
There's a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was wondering more specifically some of those things. It's like, because, you know, it's like you're all talking about tactics, but a lot of times you go out to a large mobilization, or even if you are deciding on, and people get kenneled and you don't know what's going to happen, or you're deciding to do a principal civil disobedience action. And so I'm wondering, for like those scenarios, we think there's a chance that things are going to be heated, or you actually are like maybe incurring directly a risk of arrest. What are some of the things that you would prep to do before, you know, like before that happened, or you know, and yeah, and also like if you're in that scenario, like what are some of your rights if the officers think that they're going to detain people?
I think anytime you're going to plan a civil disobedience, you really need to practice and train beforehand, number one. You also should have a situation where you say, okay, 25 of the people are going to do it. There's another 10 or 15 people there who are to support the 25 who are going to break the law. And then you can also call the national lawyers beforehand, go through them. You can also call the police and have a police liaison person designated to say, here's our plans. If anything, would you agree to at least communicate to me from your side? You perceive the situation going south, and I will communicate from you from my side, because what happened in the last thing in Oakland, that's why the police were able, when Libby Chapman did the press conference, that's why they were demarcated between the main body of the protesters, who they did make a point of saying were peaceful, and a small group broke off, and they actually tactically isolated that group in the street, but they weren't able to prevent them from still starting fires and stuff. So you can have a police liaison. I've done anti-Klan rallies with the Klan in the South, and we worked with the police because that was the only safe way to do it. You know, so you can have a police liaison. You can say, look, Officer so-and-so, those aren't our people. You know, this is our group over here. And some people say, well, you're ratting those people out. It's like, no, we're protecting our invested movement. You know.
Yeah.
Just a quick word on civil disobedience. So back to your rights after arrest. You do have a right to remain silent, so if you are taken into police custody, you don't have to tell them anything. They cannot slap on additional charges to you if you do not speak to them and you do not wish to speak to them. And if you do request an attorney, I know some people watch Law and Order or crime you know, fiction. One will be appointed. Not necessarily Rory, but you know, somebody like him will be appointed to you at no cost, so you have the right to legal counsel. If things get heated, if they want you to rat out some of your other protesters, you don't have to talk to them, and that's not espionage. You will not be charged with that. If you are doing a sit-in, I would recommend, just from the police reports we've seen, that have listed resisting, obstructing, delaying justice, to really be easy. Do not counter-strike, do not play off physically the officer. They may do something horrible to you. They may be tackling you and shouting, "Stop resisting, stop resisting," in which case you have to deal with it afterwards. I'm blanking on the second part of your question, but I'll pass it over.
I'd also just add to that, again, a few little things, police officers can lie to you. They can lie to you after you've been arrested and you're being asked questions. They can say, well, someone else told us that you were the one who put all that together. And that might not be true. It might be a way to get you to talk. You shouldn't be in that situation, because if you've been arrested and the police are trying to speak with you, you should be telling them you want an attorney and you want to exercise your right to remain silent. I don't want to answer any questions. I want to be silent. I want an attorney, and I agree with whoever said that asking for an attorney is probably the strongest of those protections if the truth does come out, to stop them from being able to continue interrogating you. Some of these little things, like, you're legally allowed to film the police. So maybe you're at something that's going on, you see something happening, you want to film the police officer who's arrested someone, who's tackled someone, and the police officer turns to you, get out of here, shut off your camera. I consider those to be kind of closer to judgment calls. On the one hand, you have a legal right to film a police officer. Maybe what you might want to do is kind of step a few steps away until attention is off you, but continue filming. On the other hand, what Ariel referenced, California Penal Code Section 148 is a law here. People call it resisting arrest, but it's actually resisting, obstructing, or delaying a peace officer. And they can really use that as kind of a blanket to say that I was performing my lawful duties and this person delayed me from being able to get it done. Those are situations. Are you the only person the officer is speaking to? Do you think you're very likely that this person's going to pursue you? Are they engaged in something? Are they really just frustrated and yelling at your whole group? And maybe you can stay in the area. Particular situations require very particular advice. In general, getting away from officers is a good idea. And, I don't feel qualified to talk about tactics or, strategic decisions to go into civil disobedience. But in terms of the law, I think a good center is to, if you're free to leave, that first stage, try to leave. Try to get away from the officer. If you're at an action, a protest, and you want to stay there, try to move away from a particular officer that's tried to engage you already, to not be rerunning into that same person. You go to a different section. If you can. If you're going to get arrested, if you've been arrested, if you plan on getting arrested, maybe decide how you'd like to proceed. In my limited experience, most people who are arrested on kind of protesting charges, any kinds of charges that can come out from that, if someone wasn't hurt, if property wasn't destroyed, and this is an experience, it's not a guarantee, most of those people end up being released on their own recognizance in the morning in court. OR release is what people call it. If you're arrested on a Friday night, that means you could be held until Monday morning. If Monday's a holiday, you could be held until Tuesday morning. You might have the option to bail out if that's something you can do. You might end up, you or your family or your friends, spending thousands of dollars to get out on bail that you'll never get back. But you would have been released on your own, Monday or Tuesday morning. So that might be one thing to think about. How long are you willing to stay in there? What type of resources or money do you or your friends have available to assist with bail? Police officers is one of the few areas where they do have some discretion here. Can charge a crime as a felony resisting, felony vandalism, or misdemeanor resisting or vandalism. That'll change the amount of bail that you're facing. And if you see two people arrested for the same thing with drastically different bails, that could be a factor. So those are maybe areas to explore and think about as well.
Just one more quick thing before I pass the mic. The NLG, so they will have these liaisons there. They're trained to film, and again, they're a neutral party, and they know how to assert their rights in a calm manner. And also, they're trained to only observe the police officer's actions, which means that if they're called in to testify in court, they will testify as to what the police officer did. And if it's about what you did, if they don't remember, they don't remember, they were focused on the police officer. And they're trained to and how they treat you as a protester is certainly your First Amendment right. So they're a very powerful resource, and they have a hotline where you can call and say, hey, my buddy so-and-so is being arrested at this protest and getting hauled into this jail, and they'll have people working on your case.
I don't want to continue this too much longer, but I did want to add another point, and that is, if you're planning to do civil disobedience, you need to have a serious discussion within your group about who should actually get arrested. You should consider race, you should consider gender, you should consider class status, you should consider history, because often the most committed people are not the best person to get arrested. Okay? Because even if you've been, because what you don't want to have happen is you get arrested, the person gets arrested, they put the name on the computer, oh, you've been busted 5 times for this. Right? So if you're a serial protester, that doesn't help your cause necessarily, right? So you need to have a frank discussion about who, and consider race, gender, economic capability, who's it gonna hurt the most, you know, and that's a hardcore discussion to have, but if you're really planning to go have people go to jail, it's like, no thank you, I really don't need to go to jail again, I'm sorry. Been there, done that, you know, so, but that's real, okay? You know, and every movement at some point takes that into consideration, right? That's why you had only Cesar Chavez doing a hunger strike, as opposed to everybody who was in the union movement, United Farm. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Is it true that if you're in a protest on the public highway, so you're in the streets, are you more within your rights by, like if you're picketing, if you're moving,
Then if you're standing still,
than if you're standing still?
not in my experience.
You're talking in the street, not on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
From the little research I've done, sidewalk, you have more rights, and you're not allowed to obstruct private businesses, that sort of thing. The police may try to control you off of private property or make sure that people have a pathway. As far as the streets go, as you may have encountered, sometimes it's this organic and be a big thing where, all right, we're going out into the streets now. And sometimes you'll be allowed to. So again, back to what Cyrus said earlier, I don't know if you guys were here for that. There's a you got to judge the tempo of the situation, and you have to make a cost-benefit analysis of what you're going to do. But as far as I know, as rights go, picketing on the sidewalk, you'll have more right to be there than in the street. I know that.
Technically, you need a permit.
Jaywalking is.
Technically, you need a permit to protest in the street. And they enforce that at their discretion. But you can walk down the sidewalk, you can have a protest on the sidewalk without a permit. As long as you legally cross the intersections. So you have to stop at the lights, cross in groups. If you do it that way, there's no way they can legally tell you not to do it.
But if you plan on marching in the street, if that's the plan, then I would get a permit.
You can get a permit.
Then also, regardless of the permit status, it seems like when people are like chanting and actually saying why they're where they are, I don't know, it's almost like repellent or something. There's something protective about that from my experience in the way that police behave. If you're saying why you're there, they kind of hang back. And then the minute people stop chanting, they stop talking, they stop saying what they want, and it goes through this motion thing too, from my experience. That's why I'm wondering if there's something legal about it. But that expressing why you're there does not give you the right to be in the street, be in the public highway. So they say.
I would say there's no this is off the legal record. It's more just the organic thing of the movement and how you guys are interacting with the police. As far as I know, there's no protection based on how loud you shout, what you're shouting. And if you you are in the street. You should have a permit if you're in a situation like that, though, and this is not legal advice. You know, you have to judge the situation at hand. I have seen situations where if you're shouting and you're in unison and the police are there and it's peaceful, that they'll let you do your thing until you disperse. And maybe then will come the moment when people's rights are going to get violated. Now, you know, people are being picked off. Oh, I saw this guy smoke a joint in the middle of the crowd. I'm going to approach him now. And again, that's an easier situation for a police consensual encounter than if you're a uniformed group. Again, this isn't legal advice. This is just in the field observations. So yeah, you are, you know, if you are a glob and you're strong and you're peaceful, then you are protected to a certain extent, just not in the legal sense, but, you know, in the human sense, in the political, social sense. But yeah, I can't speak to, but I'm pretty sure there's no differentiation of your protection based on what you're shouting and how you're shouting it.
It's the city. I mean, Oakland will let you take the streets pretty much without a permit, which is a reflection of the general political situation here. But different mayor, same city. The mayor says, the chief of police said, the only thing you're saying might be the distinction between it's an organized protest and it's a mob, right? So if you're shouting and it looks organized, then you might recognize it that way. But when it stops and you're not shouting anymore, then it's either time to get out of the streets. You see what I mean? If you're looking at it from a cop standpoint, it's over, so disperse, right? And like Ari says, a lot of the issues go down when they're trying to make you disperse. It's supposed, or they reach their limit. But you know, I've been in cities where when we were shouting, that provoked the police because of what we were shouting. We were shouting like you know you did. Well, that's yeah, but.
I don't know how much about how the those was, but I'm a little bit concerned about the new Michigan, this one Michigan. And I was wondering if this new Michigan change some of the rules that we have. Like, for example, we have like protection, like protection of underground stuff, this kind of stuff. So, but Travis said now he's going to perform this thing. And then, we have this protection that I have extremely high. And is that allowed to change this some rules? Is it allowed to?
So just to confirm, so your question is, you're concerned about the incoming administration and to what extent is the president going to be able to change some of those laws and protections that are in place? Is that accurate? You guys have general thoughts? I mean, I have general thoughts. Part of what I had mentioned earlier was there's constitutional rights, U.S. constitutional rights, and those are a lot of the protections that have been discussed in the immigration and criminal law context, right? In those, it requires congressional approval. It requires a lot for those constitutional rights to be changed. Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights, and so on and so forth. So those are rights that would be very, very difficult to change and are very unlikely to change. Now, that's the highest law of the land, the U.S. Constitution. State law, okay, so those are some of the laws and local laws that we were talking about, like California laws related to employment and housing, and local laws like in Oakland. Those are passed by cities and states that want to protect their populations more than the federal law. So states cannot pass laws that are less protective than the federal law, but they can pass laws that are more protective than federal law. States can do that, and the cities within each state can be more protective than each state. So you have three levels, right? You have the federal, which is the base, and then you have states that provide greater protection, and local ordinances provide greater protection. So a lot of what's happening right now is those state and local ordinance laws, those aren't going anywhere. And in fact, a a lot of states and local jurisdictions, cities, want to pass greater protections to protect immigrants, to provide greater funding for public defenders to get trained around immigration law and deportation defense, right? So there's still a lot of protections that are going to be in place even under the new administration. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what exactly is going to change, right? In terms of deportation of immigrants who have, crimes. How are the crimes going to be defined? I can allow to speak to that a little bit more, but we won't know until after the administration comes in, and I think it would be a good idea to consider potentially having another Know Your Rights once we have more information to keep the community informed, to keep students apprised of once we know what exactly is going to happen. So right now, I think the goal is to let people know what are your rights on the street, what are your rights in your house, what are your rights when you're driving, what are your rights in the workplace, so that you know what those rights are and that those rights are going to be in place. But then once we know what the administration is actually going to change, in the future maybe have another session where we can talk a little bit more about that. I don't know if anybody else wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, well, with regards to going up, with regards to immigration, it's the same thing as Fernanda had said. So it's a process. There's certain things that can be taken away that are not necessarily laws. So sort of like the easier things that can actually change. But with regards to certain laws that have already passed, procedures, those take a while for them to change. And we don't even know whether that's going to happen or not, or whether things are going to stay the same. With regards to the immigration perspective, we don't know if it's going to get worse or it's going to get better. A lot of people don't really understand that within this current administration, more people have gotten deported than any other administration in the past. So my question, my personal opinion is, can you get any worse? And we don't know. Probably can stay the same. Probably will get better. But with regards to people who have committed crimes, there's always an enforcement within the Department of Homeland Security that they can target people who have a lot of crimes. And the law has been there since '97. The only question is whether the administration really wants to enforce the laws or not. And so I think that's what has happened right now. It's like a lot of people have been deported just because of the fact that the law has been enforced in a more stricter way, without really giving any type of additional relief. There hasn't been any type of amnesty. There's no immigration reform. So that's one of the questions as to whether that's going to happen, with the new administration.
Just a quick addition. Those rights that Fernando mentioned, the constitutional ones, apply to everybody. Doesn't matter if you're undocumented, if you're a citizen, LPR, you have those rights. If you get arrested, and the officers say, "Oh, I'm checking a search incident to arrest," like Rory said, you don't have an ID on you, are you a citizen of this country? Do you have a right to remain silent? They are not allowed to use that against you, and that is not a crime. So you have that right, no matter who you are and what your national origin is. You do not need to be a U.S. citizen to have those rights, and I can't really urge enough the value in remaining silent and not giving police the consent to search if they ask for it. You have all those rights. And in a situation where you are pressured to give consent on the street and so forth, and you might also not be a citizen, you may feel obliged to, but that's not the law in this country, you have the right to refuse consent to search as well.
The only thing I would add to that, if you're going to do that, just ask for a lawyer at the same time. See, which is buffering the situation. So when you say, "Look, I don't want to talk to you, I come on board. Because at least that way you put that on the table, because you can get a very negative reaction to saying, I don't want to talk, because that, if the police perceives that as a challenge by someone who they feel is not their equal or equivalent, then they might get aggressive. We go back to racial profiling 101, right? It's like, what right have you got to talk to me? I'm the cop, you're the person of color. Give me a break. Didn't you read the script? You know, kind of thing. Did you have a question, still? You had a
I do remember something about being in motion and standing still. I know there's something.
Well, there is. Part of the protest law is if you're moving, right, you're not loitering, okay?
Right.
And if you're standing still, you could be charged with loitering, theoretically. I mean, that was used against, that has been used against protesters, like that. So there's part of that part. But fundamentally, to be in the streets, you need a permit, which gives them the option of forcing you out of the streets, which in Oakland, politically, the city doesn't feel as, you know, when it's something like Black Lives Matter, Oakland, Libby Schaffner compromising herself by trying to get people on the street for that. You know, it's that kind of political balance. But in Concord, I wouldn't try it.
Question over here.
Hi, my name is Andrea, and thanks for coming. I'm not sure if you answered these questions, I think I'm a little late, but what about students and immigrant students? What about sanctuary schools or sanctuary cities? What exactly means that? Because I feel like it is a misunderstanding, and we hear so much about in the news what it is and it isn't positive. And so, as a student and as an immigrant, do I have any rights at school?
So the question is whether you have,
Any rights at school?
At the school.
At the school.
Whether
Like
there's a
some type of
sanctuary.
security, like, am I gonna get deported if I'm in school?
you're in school. Like I mentioned before, it's not, immigration cannot just come in here and take wherever they want. You know, they have, it kind of like works kind of like with the criminal law procedure. You know, if someone suspected of committing a crime, you know, they can go ahead and try to arrest them. It works kind of like the same way with regards to immigration. They have to kind of have some information that you are undocumented or don't have any status here. But they cannot just like pretty much do like a profile. You thinking like, okay, this person's going to be, I believe this person is undocumented. I'm just going to go ahead and take them in. But it doesn't work that way. So I mean, coming into the schools and trying to pick up anybody who they suspect, I don't think it will be very easy for them to do that, because I think that would be like a violation of like certain rights. With regards to sanctuary cities, from what I know is it's like a sharing of information. They won't turn people in. Doesn't stop immigration from like carrying out their duties in certain like cities. But the fact that I know that before there used to be immigration holds, like sometimes if the police will arrest you or will try to like detain you to question you, I know they sometimes share that information, or they themselves call immigration to try to give them the information this person doesn't have any documents. So, but I believe that if you're here in school, it will be really hard for them unless they actually have certain information that you are here undocumented.
Okay, and what about, let's say, that the parents of immigrant students are illegal, but the student born here, that means there is some information in the system where the family probably can get deported. Is that a way that they can get information?
Right, see, so like, they cannot do a name search and try to determine whether, that parent doesn't have any documents. So for example, if a person is registered here at school, they list their parents like in the paperwork, it's not that easy to determine, because a lot of people have the same names. A lot of people who may have the same name is undocumented, another person may be a citizen. It will be pretty much like a very big problem if they go after a person who they suspect just by the name that person doesn't have any documents. The best way for them to actually determine whether someone doesn't have any lawful status here is normally once they have like fingerprints of that person. So a lot of people who get arrested, that information can be shared with the Department of Homeland Security, and they can do a search to see if that person doesn't have any lawful status. That's pretty much like what I know from my experience, that a lot of people get targeted or know where that person lives is if they actually have fingerprints. But with regards to like information like on documents, it's very difficult to determine what the status of that person is.
And I don't practice immigration law, so I can't speak as well as another can, but just in keeping an eye on news and, the information that just is out there generally. There's been a lot of mayors from cities, a lot of chief of police that have said, look, our police, our city police, our county, our local police is not going to do the work of the federal government, okay? So this is just generally, so you can understand what that interaction means. So if it's a sanctuary city, they said, look, we're not going to share whatever information so that you can do a fishing expedition to find out who's undocumented or who's not, okay? They can still try to request that information if it relates to, a certain crime. Right now, we don't know what exactly those crimes are going to be that they try to search for in the county or local prisons. But that's what that sanctuary city means. It acts as a buffer and says, look, we're not going to do the federal government's bidding to try to, help deport our community and population. So a lot of mayors have come out, and I think it's important to keep an eye out which cities have, sanctuary status. I think there's probably like a website that keeps track of that. And it mainly relates to, like, but not to mention, sharing the information. Yeah, for sure.
Earlier, we passed out a few red cards that say, provide information on what to do if you're detained, you or a loved one. I have a couple of copies if anybody wants extra ones, but that may be helpful. And while I don't practice immigration, the organization that I work for, Centro Legal, has clinics, free clinics and consultations if you or a loved one or anybody has an immigration question or problem.
We have about 5 minutes, and we also want to be respectful of your guys' time. If there's any other questions, what we can do is we're going to be here. You can feel free to come up, and we can answer any individual personal questions that you might have. Thank you for your time, and thank you to Alicia and everyone.
Thank you all so much for giving up your evening. And I am so down for once we got Looney Tunes up there elected, we'll have another one to know what to prepare for. So thank you all for coming. If anybody has questions, and also I'd like to get any of your contact information for future workshops or referrals or